Most people think of leaders as being military officers, presidents, dictators, movement organizers, and others. But a leader can also be someone who's less pronounced. Edwin Stanton Porter helped lead the world of filmmaking into a new generation, and his legacy is embedded in every advancement made in cinema today.
1895, 1896, there were two good projectors that were developed. One by two Frenchmen, Louis and Auguste Lumière, and then there were also a guy named Thomas Armand in the United States. And Thomas Edison bought the rights to use that projector when he first showed movies in the United States in April of 1896.
Porter was discharged from the Navy on June 18, 1896. He affirmed that his career as a motion picture operator began in June 1896, and he may have stayed briefly in New York City to operate the Vidoscope at Coster and Miles. At the end of the month, he was back in Connellsville, but soon went to California to operate the first Vidoscope machine exhibited at the Los Angeles Orpheum.
Porter was working for this company called the Eden Musée, and one of the kinds of movies that they started getting in 1898 were movies of the Spanish-American War. And but they were just single-shot movies. You can still see some of them today. And Porter was a projectionist at that time. He wasn't a filmmaker. He was a projectionist. So, like someone working down at Regal, you know. And he got this idea, let's show a bunch of these Spanish-American War films in order. So he edited them, or he cut them together, and they became quite popular programs. It was a way of kind of helping support the war effort, you know. And there was, in the newspapers at the time, there were a lot of articles about, you know, supporting the troops and so on, just like we hear today. And so Porter sort of introduced the idea of editing in a certain way, putting together a series of these motion pictures, you know. Each one arrived to him in a solitary way, but he put them together into a program.
The Eden Musée, a center in New York that provided regular showings of films, provided Porter with his main source of employment. While projecting the Musée's films, Porter was involved in the creation of superior programming that gave the Musée an outstanding reputation.
And they started thinking about the idea of maybe movies should have more than one shot. Not just one shot, but more than one shot, and maybe they could even tell stories. And Edison hired him in 1900 to make movies for him, as opposed to being a projectionist. So he joined the Edison Motion Picture Company in 1900. By that time, they had a studio in New York City on the top of a building, and they had some skylights and so on. So they had some natural light in that studio. And so he started making some movies, and I think that's why he's important in film history, is that he's an important early guy in doing multi-shot narrative films, shots that tell a story. So some of the early ones were pretty rudimentary. Like in 1902, he made a film called Jack and the Beanstalk. And it's like 3 shots. You know the story of Jack and the Beanstalk. Guy goes up, where the giants are and so on. So in the first shot, he's climbing up the beanstalk. In the second shot, he's up, with the giant. And in the third shot, he's climbing down the beanstalk. That was the whole movie.
In 1900, Porter was hired to the Edison Company and put in charge of motion picture production at Edison Studio in New York City. His movies were made up of shots that told a story, which was very different from the other movies of the time period.
But for that time, that was a kind of a new idea. You know, let's tell a coherent story, and the movie will not be just one shot, but it'll be multiple shots.
At the same time, a French filmmaker made a movie called The Trip to the Moon, which was made up of 14 shots. Porter saw this and decided he would make something more elaborate than Jack and Beanstalk. This resulted in the making of the Great Train Robbery in 1903.
It's probably most famous for. That movie came out in 1903, and it's significant because of a number of things. One is that it has some shots outdoors and some shots indoors. So it goes back and forth between shots out in the world, some in interior buildings. So that's one thing, the reason it's important. A second reason is that it had more shots. In fact, stylistically, it's very close to A Trip to the Moon, because it has, I think, the same number of shots. I think 14 shots.
Edwin Stanton Porter displayed leadership in his innovative thinking, and despite the fact that not many people recognize his name today, Porter's legacy will live on as he did, behind the scenes.